a lot to enjoy about 1997 when it came to video games. Crash Bandicoot got Cortex Strikes Back, Final Fantasy got one of its biggest entries in Final Fantasy VII, N64 players got GoldenEye, and Castlevania fans got Symphony of the Night, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But rest assured, Mega Man fans had their hands full all the same. We got Mega Man 8, a game I thought that was gorgeous but rather unremarkable compared to previous games. Nothing bad, but nothing fantastic. And X fans were given the next title in the X lineup, Mega Man X4, released for both the PlayStation and Sega Saturn. Although there's no real differences between the two this time, it's all a matter of what controller you like, that's about it. With new hardware and technology, it was a safe bet that Mega Man X4 was going to deliver in graphical fidelity that the Super Nintendo only wish it could replicate. And yeah, if we're going to start somewhere, let's start with how this game looks. I mean, I love it. I love the sprite quality of the 32-bit Mega Man games. I'll save the little nuances for X5 and X6 when I get to them, but for X4, man, for X and Zero specifically, they're swimming in both detail and smooth animation that always looked cool in action. I love that dashing and wall jumping now leaves these colorful after images, giving Mega Man X4 a sort of psychedelic aesthetic from time to time. Now, the bosses don't get quite the same level of attention as far as animation goes, but the detail is no less apparent. Like, I love the way Frost Walrus slowly makes his way into the room, emphasizing his large frame, or how Slash Beast makes it look like he missed his own train and is frantically trying to get back on. The environments radiate with color and are packed with plenty of background and foreground elements, and I really want to commend Capcom for just taking what worked in a 16-bit setting and simply giving it a polish. You know, in a time where companies were making a big push for polygons and strictly 3D games, Capcom went against trends and focused on what they knew from previous experiences. And they were pressured for sure. Sony initially refused to even release Mega Man X4 to focus on 3D games, but Capcom didn't buckle and pressed on. And you know, they could have cheapened out and make like a boss made of polygons with maybe some wireframes, but no, they stuck to their guns and made a game that even today looks pretty damn good, unlike a 3D game from the time that would look primitive in comparison to today's standards. Okay, but not everything passes the mark. I'll go more into detail for X5 and X6, but some of the pre-rendered stuff looks bland in comparison. Like the Power Ranger Sigma heads here, I always thought these looked unfinished if I can put them some way. And like Mega Man 8, X4 also has some animated FMVs that are quite good as far as animation quality goes, and there's a healthy number of them. But also like Mega Man 8, and because I think both games shared similar voice talent, well yeah, the acting in X4 is just utter shit. Now, we don't get anything like Dr. Wily or what Mega Man, but once again, everyone sounds like they're recording in their parents' living room in the middle of the night, and I'm guessing the script didn't have many punctuation marks?
Don't ask such a silly question. I'm breaking contact now.
I'm disappointed in you, Colonel. What do you think you're doing?
No, this isn't happening. There's no reason for me to go on. What? What am I fighting for?
That's a good question.
Yeah, not very good. And also doesn't help the story attached to it is, in my opinion, one of the worst in the series by far. Let's jump into that real quick. Okay, for the first time in the series, Mega Man X4 lets you choose as either X or Zero from the start. The main story is largely the same, but you get to see some interesting tidbits from a character's perspective. Okay, wait, scratch that. You see some interesting tidbits from Zero's perspective because holy fuck did this game not give a fuck about X. A large maverick has been spotted attacking the Sky Lagoon, prompting X and Zero to head into action, but they're too little too late as the Sky Lagoon is damaged far beyond repair and sent crashing into the ground, killing countless civilians below.
Oh shit.
While assessing the damage and taking care of the large maverick, X and Zero come across the colonel of the Repliforce, a military organization consisting only of Reploids that were originally tasked with helping the Maverick Hunters, but were deemed too ineffective. That little tidbit is only found in the manual, by the way, because the game itself does not mention it in the slightest. Curious about the presence of the Repliforce army in conjunction with the Maverick attack, X insists that Colonel lay down his weapon for the time and come in for questioning so that Repliforce can clear their names and ensure they had nothing to do with it. Otherwise, they'll be branded as Mavericks. Colonel remarks that the Repliforce wasn't responsible for the attack but refuses to disarm anyway, even temporarily, because it would bring dishonor and shame to the Repliforce name. Oh boy, this is going to be one of those stories, isn't it? And it gets even better because here's the thing, the general of the Repliforce in an earlier cutscene is seen talking with an ominous figure that is clearly Sigma, so right away we know who the real bad guy is and all that, and though Sigma tries to convince the general that humans aren't to be trusted and that they have the means to destroy them, the general refuses to betray the humans and sends Sigma on his way. As Sigma makes his exit, the man says out loud that the general will soon see things in a different way and begins cackling maniacally out loud. This does not raise any red flags within the general, and soon enough the Sky Lagoon incident happens and this dumb motherfucker can't put two and two together. And sure enough, it's really Sigma responsible for the Maverick attack because of course it was. He managed to convince this fellow over here, Magma Dragoon, former Maverick Hunter, to cause the Sky Lagoon to crash down while Repliforce was patrolling the area so that Repliforce would look like a suspicious party. And for the record, the reason why Magma Dragoon was okay with all this was because he wanted to fight with X and Zero. Like, that's it. Like, motherfucker, couldn't you have just asked like a friendly sparring session here and there? I'm sure there's a Reploid mixed martial arts or some other shit like that in this world, you dumbass. Anyway, despite knowing the consequences of Repliforce refusing to clear their names, the general then announces that they plan on creating their own utopia for Reploids, completely independent from human affairs. And though the general states that this is in no way an act of insurrection or rebellion against their human creators, that doesn't stop some members of Repliforce from attacking civilization to distract the Maverick Hunters anyway, as the rest of the Repliforce begins to build their safe haven in the one place that hasn't been corrupted by politics.
Space!
My thing is, with a little retooling here and there, and maybe the total exclusion of Sigma, I can kind of see what they were going for here. Let's not make a story so black and white, and maybe throw a shade of gray in here to see who's really in the wrong. But from the get-go, X4 tells us that Sigma is the one pulling the strings, completely removing that air of mystery that could have been used to sell the story. Was Repliforce truly responsible for the attack and maybe trying to enact revenge for their perceived uselessness? Maybe they were good all along and the real bastards are human beings, you know, that sort of shit? But no, it was Sigma from the very start, and the result is the usual X story, with everyone now looking like complete dipshits. And that is just from X's side of the story, because on Zero's side, all of this is immediately overshadowed by something more sinister in the works. Finally, deciding to develop that plot thread introduced in Mega Man X2, X4 confirms that Zero's creator is none other than Dr. Wily. Now, it doesn't mean much at the end of the day as far as this story goes, but it's no less captivating because now I want to learn more about Zero's past. And you know what? So did KJ Inafune, because starting with Mega Man X4, it's clear that Zero was who the development team was really focused on, for reasons I'll get more into when we get to Mega Man X5, you know, if you didn't already know. X in this game is such a leftover. He has no character arc whatsoever. He's just going through the motions. He's a Maverick hunter. He's got to fight Mavericks. He kills Mavericks. That's it. The end. Zero, on the other hand, has a closer connection to the Colonel, as they're apparently war buddies of the sort, and Zero also has the hots for the Colonel's sister, Iris. So you'd think there'd be more of an emotional struggle for Zero, as he has to come to grips that his friend is possibly going rogue, and that his sort of girlfriend constantly pleads that the two don't fight, but the two end up fighting anyway because, but my pride. Halfway through Zero's story, the Colonel contacts Zero to meet with him in this set destination. That's it, nothing else was said, and though Iris begs Zero not to fight him, Zero says this is now a matter of personal pride. What? For all you know, dude, he just wants to talk with you. But then immediately afterwards, we see Colonel at the meetup point waiting for Zero, and Zero just straight up fucking attacks him completely unprovoked. Okay, maybe it was a safe assumption that the Colonel wanted to trade some fisticuffs, but Zero should have at least asked first. And then he has the balls to ask Colonel to stop the revolution after attempting to take his life, with Colonel proclaiming that he'll never do so, to which I say, gee, maybe if you didn't attack first and ask questions later, that the Colonel might have been willing to listen, you dumbass. But the Colonel has his share of blame for this as well, because he should have just outright said in that message he gave to Iris that he just wanted to talk to Zero, because check out his response after Zero attacks him.
I'm disappointed in you, Colonel. Ah! What do you think you're doing?
If he had to ask that, that means he had no intention of fighting the dude in the first place, but they don't talk to each other and just keep fighting. And because of honor and all that, Zero ends up killing the Colonel and eventually Iris, since she sort of loses her mind after the Colonel dies. And look, I'd feel sorrier for Zero. I mean, killing someone you care about is no doubt a difficult thing to deal with, but we're literally told nothing about Iris. This is the first time we're introduced to her. We're supposed to just accept that Zero and Iris are a thing with no backstory or development whatsoever, so no, this doesn't make me feel anything, I'm sorry to say. Fuck it, maybe I've gone Maverick. This right here just exists to simply kick Zero in the robo balls, and because someone thought the X series wasn't darker than the classic series already. But since we know Sigma is the real threat behind the scenes, it doesn't take long for him to reveal himself. Now for X, it's just another Sunday, I take it, but for Zero, these two have a bit of history, as Sigma begins to explain. Now Maverick Hunter X on the PSP sort of retcons this, but as you know, Sigma was originally the leader of the Maverick Hunters. And one day he gets a report of a berserk Maverick found in an old research facility. This turns out to be Zero, and the two begin duking it out. Now Sigma gets the ever-living shit kicked out of him, but Zero suddenly loses control when something inside his helmet goes off, momentarily disabling him. Sigma then takes the opportunity to knock him out and bring him back to Dr. Kane, but it's heavily implied that merely encountering Zero was how Sigma was slowly corrupted into the dickhead we know him now. So yeah, Zero was not only created by Dr. Wily, but he was originally a Maverick too. That's a bit interesting, could have easily made that into its own story without any of this dumb Repliforce shit, and being fair, that is the focus for the next game, but it feels this is what the writers were more interested in at the time, and whatever they had planned for Repliforce, if anything at all, was left hung to dry. By the way, I love when Sigma reminds Zero that he was once the commander of the Maverick Hunters and that Zero was once a Maverick, you know, to give us that shocking revelation. But as soon as the flashback ends, Sigma is then shocked to learn that Zero was a Maverick. Like, what? Dude, you just told us that.
Where's that red Maverick that wiped out Garma's unit?
Wait, Zero, you were a Maverick? This was the result of a slight mistranslation, and thanks to @MultiMarioBrothers6 on Twitter for pointing that out. It's still funny to think that Sigma has some sort of memory lapse there. He did get his shit wrecked back then. But as X or Zero, Sigma is taken down once again inside Repliforce's space station, but not before he attempts to fire the Repliforce's space cannon down at the Earth. Oh yeah, the Repliforce also had a giant space gun pointed down, and that's where they plan to start their utopia. But this wasn't an insurrection or rebellion, idiots. But luckily, the general sees the errors of his ways and sacrifices himself to prevent the laser from firing. With the Repliforce completely dismantled and Sigma taken care of once and for all for the 4th time, X and Zero are left to ponder about their futures. Okay, well, X is left to ponder about his future. Zero's a fucking mess, since he just lost 2 good friends. But that's where the game ends. I mean, at least we're not watching things over the horizon for the 4th fucking time. But yeah, that was something. Maybe I'm missing a detail here that was explained in some supplementary material, but damn, this story is dumb. I don't see how I'm supposed to feel any sort of sympathy for the Repliforce. Fuck out of here. These folks didn't even try to clear their name when they were marked as Mavericks, something that could have been avoided entirely if they just took the time to explain they had nothing to do with the earlier incident, which was true. It was all Sigma's doing. But no, they not only refuse to drop their weapons, but then they go and further dig themselves deeper when they begin their revolution so that they can achieve their independence. Again, if Sigma weren't a thing in the story, maybe it could have worked with a bit of a rewrite. Or hell, if you have to have Sigma in the story at all, have Sigma infect the Repliforce with the Sigma virus. Remember that little tidbit from X3? Where the hell did that thing go? That would go ahead and explain their illogical behavior and all that. It's a simple, if tired, workaround. Or fuck it, just scrap the whole thing entirely and focus on Zero's origin, because I'm sorry, once they started planting those seeds, that's what I'm more interested in. Iris is dead? Who cares? Alright, well, if I'm playing Mega Man X4, it certainly isn't for the plot anyway. And I want to stress that even though the story is dumb, the production values are still great. Animated cutscenes and all that are always a plus. And this is the only PS1 game to have them, as we'll see later down the road. So in my opinion, X4 is better for that. So I figure we're going to be talking more about Zero in this video as far as gameplay goes, since this is sort of his major debut if you don't count his haphazard inclusion in Mega Man X3. And X isn't that significantly different than before, it's just now everything looks prettier. All the different ride armors from before are gone. We instead only get 2 varieties, one that has and one that can hover for a bit and shoot lasers. I'd say they're about as inconsequential as before. They're there to make the journey a little easier, but nothing else. Well, you may not even need them at all if I'm being honest, because X4 is one of the easiest games in the series so far, if for any reason, then this one. In X4, stages are now broken up into 2 acts, separated by load screens, and whenever a new section begins, your health and weapon ammo are completely refilled. You could be on death's welcome mat when you finish Act 1, and X will make damn sure you know he's suffering. Oh god, I'm dying! But as soon as Act 2 starts, everything's back to normal. Even if you somehow lose all your lives against, say, the boss, you resume from the 2nd act, so you don't even have to play the entire stage again. In conjunction with sub-tanks, fair and balanced enemy design, and returning upgrades, this makes X4 a comfortable breeze compared to X2 and particularly X3. My only low point would be Jet Stingray's level when I'm trying to score the hard tank and sub tank specifically. It's an auto-scroller with a jet pike and it controls just fine, but if you miss either upgrade, you gotta kill yourself, and thank fuck lives don't really matter anymore with this new checkpoint system, because I died a lot here. Which makes me question the purpose of this EX tank though. You grab this and you start with 4 lives instead of 2, in a game where death is already a slap on the wrist. It's weird. But that's about the only exception, because everywhere else, it's so easy to find hard tanks and sub-tanks, even Dr. Light capsules. Sometimes they're just in plain sight. X4 has some of the best armor upgrades for X, bar none. The leg upgrade doesn't let us dash straight up anymore, but we still have the basic air dash, and now you can hover in midair for a couple of seconds, which I found great for avoiding a ton of ground attacks while being able to simultaneously remain on the offense. The body armor absorbs damage as usual, and now grants X the Nova Strike, a super powerful dash attack that also makes you invincible while doing so. But I don't think it's as helpful as the Giga Crush from X2 if I'm being honest. It's a neat bonus for the added damage reduction, nothing more. I'm guessing we caught Dr. Light's previously recorded messages on a good day, because this time he has 2 arm upgrades ready for us. There's one that makes your charge shot super huge and can pierce through enemies and leave a damaging residue that reminds me of the Flash Bomb from Mega Man 8. And then there's the one that lets you hold up to 4 charge shots, which I mean, that's amazing. It's like X2's Buster upgrade on crack, and my preferred choice. You know, it's good to know that I have the big guns in store without having to constantly hold down the shoot button and drown the music out with ring. But the helmet upgrade takes the cake. It not only lets you charge your special weapons, but it gives you unlimited ammo for special weapons unless you charge them. God damn, are we sure this isn't a leftover debug tool? Unlimited ammo for special weapons is fantastic. I mean, I don't like half of these weapons, but this is a surefire way for me to test them. But yeah, not a fan of some of these. My biggest gripe is that in terms of power, they don't compare to a regular charge shot, you know, your default weapon. I like the lightning web because I can wall jump off of the shot and get through an obstacle that way. It's pretty satisfying to use. And the rising fire is damn good for taking care of threats above you, particularly in those vertical sections. Now, thanks to the helmet upgrade, I was able to experiment with these tools with no worry about ammo consumption, but as before, the best thing most of these were good for were Maverick weaknesses, and like X3, the Mavericks become a total joke when you hit them where it hurts. If you want to make things even easier for yourself, there's a special code you can input to give X his ultimate armor, which gives him all of his upgrades, including unlimited use of his Nova Strike. Say goodbye to challenge. It's cheating, but I love the look of the armor. I kind of wish it was just a cosmetic upgrade, much like the black armor you can give Zero with his special code. But yeah, let's talk Zero now. It's his grand debut as a fully playable character. He no longer has a phobia of boss doors, and he's got a good 8 hours of sleep, so no more union breaks. Unlike X and unlike X3, Zero doesn't use a buster of any sort, at least not yet. He's all about getting up close and personal with his beam saber. This makes Zero inherently riskier to use because of this. It's not easy avoiding certain things because you have to basically hug a lot of shit. But give it a couple of stages and you'll see why I think Zero is personally the better option of the two. While X emphasizes defensive play and is generally safer because of his long-range options, Zero encourages going all out. Unleash your 3-hit combos and your jump attacks and watch as your sword shred through the opposition. There's nothing more satisfying than jumping in at the right moment and slashing through a big robot, watching it explode as I do so. Instead of getting a variety of different special weapons whenever he destroys a Maverick, Zero is instead granted a new attack for his sword, like a fiery uppercut or an icy downward stab. Or it could be a mobility upgrade, like an air dash or a straight up double jump, since Zero also doesn't really get any armor upgrades. With the exception to Cyber Peacock's weapon, Zero's abilities don't cost any ammo. You're free to use them as often as you like. They're like special moves from Street Fighter, and when you're fully tricked out, Zero becomes a super versatile close-range fighter that is so much fun to use. I already consider myself an extremely reckless player when it comes to the X series, but now I feel I can get away with that thanks to Zero. I love going fast with this guy, and thanks to the checkpoint system refilling my health between acts, I don't have to worry much about conserving my health unless I play too recklessly. When fighting Mavericks, he does have a slightly harder time since some special abilities are not necessarily new attacks, just movement upgrades, and I mean, what the fuck is an air dash gonna do against Slash Beast? Nothing. So there's less options to choose from, meaning you have to fight more Mavericks with your basic 3-hit combo. In that way, Zero is inferior to X, but I mean, I don't give a shit. Zero can double jump when he defeats Split Mushroom, X cancel, blow me. I mean, I prefer one over the other, but I can play as either. Mega Man X4 is a giant step up from X3 in many ways. Yeah, sure, I also mean that aesthetically, but that's sort of cheating, generational upgrades and all that. It's a very safe Mega Man X game though, since besides the inclusion of Zero, it only works off of what was good from X1 and X2. It doesn't change the formula in any major way, doesn't really have anything that gives it its own identity. Did you enjoy Mega Man X1 and 2? Mega Man X4 is more of the same with better graphics and sound. And you know what, in today's day and age where you can get it for about $5 in the PlayStation Store, that's perfectly fine. I realized that back then I sort of gave Mega Man 8 shit for being unremarkable besides the added graphical polish, and you could totally argue the same thing with Mega Man X4. But as I said, I prefer the X formula over Classic because of the additional things you can do. It is biased, I completely see that and I agree with that, but that's honestly how I feel. X4 ranks up there as one of my favorite games in the series and a good return to form after X3 sort of sidestepped into a ditch. Let me see. Yeah, I think we're about halfway done. We have about 4 games left to look at, and an RPG. Yeah, I should have mentioned that earlier. I do plan on ending this marathon with a look at Mega Man X Command Mission for the PS2. It's an awfully odd way of ending it, I realize, but it is part of the X series, so I gotta look at that. But next time we got another double header for you. We're looking at both Mega Man X5 and Mega Man X6 to cap off Mega Man X's 32-bit journey through the PlayStation 1 era. And cool thing about it, I suppose, is that by the time this video goes up, the Mega Man X Legacy Collection will be out, so I think it'd be a little fun to record X5 and X6 through those videos and see if anything, has changed for the better, for worse, who knows. We've got a lot to talk about for next time, so I hope you see you guys then and there. Thank you all for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic night, and take care.